Welcome to the Myrrhologist Podcast. I'm your host, Marissa St. Luke. And today we're going to be talking about the Spirit and the bride say, come. I mean, do we really know what that means? I know I didn't for a long time. For years, I've read Revelation 22:17 as a beautiful verse and a closing statement. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized that there was something much deeper happening beneath the surface. This is the final cry of the entire Bible. And if the king is coming here, then why would the bride be leaving? Think about that. So hidden inside this invitation is a revelation that reaches all the way back to Genesis and all the way forward into eternity. So let's start with the bride. The Hebrew word for bride is Kallah, and its gematria value is 55. But before we look at that number, I want to take a look at the letter meanings. The first one is Kaf, the second one is Lamed, and the third one is Hey. Kaf is presenting an open palm. It speaks of covering, authority, and being held. And Lamed is the shepherd's staff, and it speaks of learning, following, and being led. Hey is the breath, revelation, and the breath of God moving through a vessel. So if we put that together, the bride becomes the covered one who follows the shepherd and carries his breath. And what's interesting is we don't see the bride being identified first by what she does. She is identified by what she carries, and she carries his breath. And that becomes important because Revelation does not say the bride is standing silently beside the Spirit. It says the Spirit and the bride speak together. Now let's look at the Spirit. In Hebrew, the word is Ruach, breath, wind, spirit. The invisible power that moves what would otherwise remain still. Without the Spirit, there is no breath. Without breath, there is no voice. Without a voice, there is no invitation. The Spirit is supplying the breath, and the bride supplies the agreement. And together they are releasing one word, come. And the Hebrew word for come is bo. And it's Bet, Vav, and Aleph. Bet means house. Vav means connection. And so Aleph points to the one, the strength of God. And suddenly the invitation becomes the house joined to the one. Or perhaps even more beautifully, return to union. And when you put the entire verse together, the Spirit, the Ruach, the head joined to life, the bride, Kallah, the covered one who follows the shepherd and carries his breath, and together they release one cry, Bo, come. And so the language of these Hebrew pictures are showing us that it says, let the house return to the one. So the final cry of Scripture is not really an invitation. It is a proclamation. The head joined to the life and the covered one carrying his breath stand together at the end of the story, declaring, let the house return to the one. So the Spirit and the bride stand together at the end of the Bible, calling everything that was separated back into union with God. And isn't this the story of the entire Bible? In Genesis, mankind leaves union. In Revelation, everything is being called back into union. The first pages show a garden, and the last pages show a city. The first pages show separation, and the last pages show a wedding. The first pages show God walking among man, and the last pages show that God is dwelling with man. The entire story is bringing the house back to the one. And then I noticed something else. The Spirit and the bride don't say, "Take us away." They say, "Come." And this direction matters. For years, I was taught to wait for a departure, to wait for escape or removal. And yet the final cry of Scripture is not, "Get me out of here." It is, "Come." And that realization led me to this question. If the king is coming here, why would the bride be leaving? So before you answer that question, think about the direction of the biblical story. Jesus taught us to pray, "Thy kingdom come," not "Thy people go." Revelation tells us that the New Jerusalem is coming down from heaven. The dwelling place of God is coming down. The kingdom comes, the king comes, and everything is moving towards God dwelling with man. And that is why this verse became so much bigger to me than a simple invitation. It is speaking the language of reunion. It is speaking the language of a bride who longs for the presence of her bridegroom. We got two voices with one sound. We see two witnesses carrying one invitation. The heavenly witness and the earthly witness have finally come into perfect agreement. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized that Revelation 22 is actually the reversal of Genesis 3. In Genesis, the woman listened to the wrong voice. The serpent spoke and the woman agreed. The result was separation. The result was exile and a fractured house, a broken union. But in Revelation, the bride is no longer listening to the serpent's voice. The bride is speaking with the Spirit. The Spirit speaks. The bride echoes. And as the Spirit breathes, the bride releases the sound. And what was divided in Genesis is now restored in Revelation. From a woman agreeing with the serpent to a bride agreeing with the Spirit. And I want you to notice what happens immediately after this verse. It says, "Let him that heareth say, Come." The hearer becomes the speaker. The witness multiplies and the invitation expands. The bride speaks and then the hearer speaks. Then the thirsty are invited. Then the water of life is offered freely. The invitation grows outward, and it begins with the Spirit. As it moves through the bride, it reaches the hearer. It extends to the thirsty, and finally it reaches whosoever will. So the entire verse is an ever-expanding invitation into union. The Spirit and the bride stand at the end of the Bible and release the same cry because they now desire the same thing. And I believe that we are living in the season where He is pulling the rib out of the church. And once the bride is standing in the wilderness with a belly full of hidden manna, He can place His invitation in her mouth. Can He find a people whose hearts are so aligned with His that when the Spirit says, "Come," the bride is already saying the same thing? The bride is being prepared right now. And I can't help but wonder about those 30 minutes of silence in heaven mentioned in Revelation. For ages, the throne room has echoed with a cry of "Holy, holy, holy, day and night without ceasing, and heaven has declared the holiness of God. Yet Revelation speaks about a moment when heaven falls silent. Could it be that all of heaven pauses for a moment as a prepared bride finally finds her voice? I find it remarkable that the Bible ends with the Spirit and the bride speaking together, and the bride becomes so clothed in the character of her bridegroom, so filled with his presence and so aligned with his heart that when the Spirit says, "Come," the bride is already saying the same thing. Listen, the King is coming. And one day, the invitation will actually become reality. So I'm inviting you to run into the wilderness, because that is where dependence is formed. That's where all the distractions fall away. That's where the voice of the bride is discovered. So if you're looking for me, I'll be out in the wilderness eating locusts and honey, learning to echo the voice of the Spirit. If this episode blessed you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can also visit MarissaSt.Luke.com to find Hebrew name scrolls, Kingdom Crest designs, and additional resources. This episode has been brought to you by Ahava Overflow. And until next time, keep your oil filled, keep your eyes on the bridegroom, and keep listening for the sound coming from heaven. Because when the Spirit says, "Come," a prepared bride will already be saying the same thing. You've been listening to the Myrrhologist Podcast. Until next time, I'll meet you in the wilderness.